My stepmom kicked me out because I refused to sell my grandpa's pond, but soon she was shocked to learn it held something worth millions. Growing up in Woodward, Oklahoma during the 80s meant your entertainment options were pretty limited. Back then, the coolest thing a kid could do was race a Schwinn bike down Main Street or watch Mr. Jones's dog bark at his tractor like it was going to bite back. That was our version of Netflix, and PlayStation rolled into one. I'm Jack Reed, and my childhood was about as complicated as a ham sandwich. We weren't poor, but we weren't exactly swimming in cash either. Dad worked at a hardware store. Mom had passed when I was 4, and our house was the one with the peeling blue paint that Dad always promised to fix next summer. My life revolved around baseball cards I couldn't afford, Springsteen cassettes I'd play until they warped, and my grandfather Frank's pond behind his little house at the edge of town. While other kids dreamed of escaping to New York or Los Angeles, I just wanted to make it to the big leagues or maybe own a Corvette someday. Simple dreams for a simple town. Grandpa Frank was something of a local legend around Woodward, not the kind they write books about, but the kind old-timers at the diner would nod respectfully at. He had this wicked scar running down his left cheek that he got in Japan during his military service in the 60s. The story changed depending on his mood. Sometimes it was from defending America's honor, other times from falling off a jeep while exploring the Japanese countryside. He came back from overseas with 3 souvenirs: a taste for whiskey that was too expensive for his budget, endless stories about samurai honor, and 2 koi fish that looked like swimming flames. "These Japanese fellas," he'd tell me while watching the pond, "they don't see well like we do. Their officer, the one who gave me these fish, told me they'd been fighting us like hell one day, then sharing cigarettes the next. Said that's why their emperor surrendered, but their spirit never did." Grandpa had been stationed at Yokosuka Naval Base during the height of Cold War tensions. He wasn't supposed to fraternize with locals, but Grandpa Frank never was good at following rules. He'd snuck off base regularly, spending time with former soldiers who'd been his enemies not many years before. That's where he met Tanaka, an aging former officer who taught him about koi, living jewels that outlive their owners if properly cared for. When Grandpa brought those fish home, folks thought he'd lost his marbles. Oklahoma wasn't exactly known for exotic pets in those days. He built that pond with his bare hands, lined it with special rocks, and installed a filtration system that cost more than his monthly pension. "Jack," he'd say as we watched the fish swim, "these koi are just like us reed men. They hang on to life no matter what gets thrown at them." I just nodded, adjusting my Red Sox cap, and thinking fish were basically just cat snacks that hadn't been caught yet. Grandpa treated that pond like it was his own personal Garden of Eden. Every evening after work, we'd sit beside it while he smoked his cherry tobacco pipe, and I'd chew my bubble yum and listen to his stories. The way the evening light hit the water made everything seem magical somehow, like time stopped existing for a little while. He'd tell me about surviving in foreign lands, about how that Japanese officer taught him to respect silence, and about the kind of patience that comes from watching something grow slowly. Meanwhile, I'd be secretly plotting how to throw a baseball clear over Mrs. Henderson's fence without breaking another window. "Strength, Jack," he'd say in that gravel voice of his, "isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about waiting for your moment, like a fish waits for the current." I'd nod like I understood, but really I was just waiting for him to finish so I could go ride bikes with my friends. Still, something about those evenings stuck with me. The smell of cherry tobacco, the flash of red and gold beneath the water, Grandpa's croaky smile. It became part of me, like the lyrics to Sweet Home Alabama or the Pledge of Allegiance. Just one of those things that gets under your skin and stays there. When I hit high school, I started to appreciate our time together more. Teenage life was a usual mess. Girls I couldn't talk to, classes I couldn't focus in, and a general feeling that everyone else had the instruction manual to life, while I was still trying to figure out the cover page. But Grandpa's pond remained constant. The koi grew larger, their colors more vibrant, and somehow watching them swim circles made my problem seem smaller. "Those fish will outlive us all," Grandpa would say, his voice getting raspier each year. "They can live 100 years if you treat them right. Some koi in Japan have been passed down for generations, older than this country." During my senior year, Grandpa started to slow down. His walks got shorter. His time by the pond got longer. Dad had remarried by then. Linda, with her sharp smile and sharper opinions about everything from my future to the way I wore my hair. They'd moved into a bigger house across town, leaving me and Grandpa to our quiet routine. When Grandpa passed, I was 19 and washing dishes at Denny's while trying to figure out what to do with my life. Community college seemed pointless, and every other option required money we didn't have. I'd moved back in with Dad and Linda by then, sleeping in their guest room and feeling like an unwelcome visitor. The funeral was small, just family, a few veterans, and some old-timers from town. We buried him next to Grandma, whose picture he'd kept beside his bed all these years. I kept waiting for some profound feeling of loss, but mostly I just felt numb, like I was watching someone else's life through a window. A week later, we gathered at Mr. Peterson's law office downtown for the reading of the will. I was hoping for something that captured Grandpa's spirit, his pocket watch maybe, or the worn leather wallet he'd carried since before I was born. To my grandson, Jack Franklin Reed, Mr. Peterson read from behind thick glasses, "I leave my pond, the parcel of land surrounding it measuring 1 acre, and the trailer located on the northeast corner of the property." I sat up straighter. The pond and land around it? While Dad got the house and remaining acreage, I received the one place Grandpa treasured most. It wasn't the financial windfall Linda clearly hoped for. Her face fell faster than souffle in a slammed oven. But somehow it felt right. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling there was something I was missing. "Your grandfather loved to joke around, Jack," Linda said afterward, her smile as sharp as her French manicure. Dad just patted my shoulder awkwardly, saying he always did have a strange sense of humor. That night, I sat on Dad and Linda's back steps, staring at stars that seemed dimmer than usual. The pond was my childhood, my connection to Grandpa. But why only that specific piece of the property? Why not something straightforward like the house or money for college? I remembered sitting beside that water, watching those fish that Grandpa valued more than anything. "Wait for your moment, Jack," like a fish waits for the current. The words echoed in my head, but their meaning still felt just beyond my reach. What was I supposed to do with a pond and some fish? What kind of inheritance was that for a 19-year-old with no direction and even less motivation? As I headed back inside, past Linda discussing kitchen renovation plans that would cost more than my yearly salary at Denny's, I wondered if maybe Grandpa's gift was one last lesson, one I wasn't smart enough to understand yet. The weeks after Grandpa's funeral turned our house into a pressure cooker. I'd wake up to the sound of Linda's designer heels clicking across the kitchen floor, like some kind of expensive metronome, counting down the seconds until our next argument. Dad would be hiding behind his newspaper, coffee going cold as he avoided eye contact with both of us. Living with Dad and Linda felt like being trapped in one of those sitcoms about terrible neighbors, except I couldn't change the channel. Their house was nice enough on the outside, 2-story colonial with fresh paint and a lawn that Linda paid the Rodriguez kid to mow twice a week. Inside, though, it was all tension and fake smiles, like a Thanksgiving dinner where everyone's secretly mad about politics, but pretending everything's fine. I'd been working double shifts at Denny's, coming home with my hair smelling like maple syrup and my shoes squeaking from spilled soda. Linda would wrinkle her nose as I walked past, like I was tracking in more than just a scent of pancakes and disappointment. "You really should consider community college, Jack," she'd say while flipping through her interior design magazine, the one with kitchens that cost more than most people's cars. "You can't work at that greasy spoon forever." Dad would grunt in agreement from behind his Wall Street Journal, not really listening to either of us. He'd become a master at mental escape while physically present, a skill I was quickly learning myself. "I'm saving up," I'd answer, which wasn't exactly a lie. I just wasn't saving for what they thought I was. Every spare dollar I made went into a coffee can label Pond Fund. Not very creative, but it got the job done. I'd stash it under my bed like a kid hiding his Halloween candy. My grand plan was to restore Grandpa's pond to its former glory. Fix the filtration system, clean out years of built-up muck, maybe add some decorative stones around the edges. I imagined it becoming a little piece of serenity in Woodward, the kind of place Grandpa would have been proud of. When I closed my eyes at night, I could picture those koi swimming through clear water again, their red and gold scales catching sunlight like living jewels. It wasn't exactly the American dream of a white picket fence and 2.5 kids, but it was my dream. One Thursday evening, after a particularly brutal shift, some kid had thrown up in booth 7, and guess who got to clean it? I decided it was time to share my vision with Dad and Linda. I found them in the living room. Linda scrolling through her phone while some house renovation show played on their massive TV. Dad pretending to watch while actually dozing off. I've been thinking about Grandpa's pond. I started, trying to sound confident. Linda looked up from her phone, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raising slightly. Dad's eyes opened, but I couldn't tell if he was actually listening or just reacting to the sound of my voice. I want to restore it, I continued. Clean it up, get it running again. It could be really beautiful, you know? A tribute to Grandpa. For a moment, there was silence. Then Linda let out a small laugh, the kind that wasn't really about humor. "Oh, Jack," she said, setting her phone down. "Fish? Really? You're not working at a pet store." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his recliner, the leather squeaking beneath him. "It's a lot of work, son. That pond's been neglected for months." "I know, but I can do it," I insisted. "I've been researching filtration systems and—" "Sell that mud puddle," Linda interrupted, picking her phone back up. "Use the money to buy yourself some decent jeans without grease stains. That trailer and land could fetch enough to get you started on something real." My face felt hot. "It's not a mud puddle. It's my inheritance." Dad cleared his throat. "Linda's just being practical, Jack. That pond isn't worth the trouble." I went to bed angry that night, staring at the ceiling of their guest room that never really became my room, despite the 6 months I'd been sleeping there. The glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck up there when I was 12 during weekend visits had long since lost their glow, much like my relationship with my father. The next morning, I left for work earlier than usual, skipping breakfast to avoid another round of Linda's helpful suggestions about my future. But when I got home that afternoon, something felt off. There was an unfamiliar sedan parked in our driveway, sleek black, with a vanity plate that read, "Sold for you." I found them in the kitchen, Dad, Linda, and a man in a suit that looked expensive in that understated way rich people prefer. They had papers spread across the granite countertop that Linda had installed last spring, replacing the perfectly good laminate that had been there before. "Jack," Dad said, looking surprised to see me. "You're home early." Linda recovered faster. "This is Mr. Pratt from Oklahoma Luxury Realty. He's helping us evaluate some options." Mr. Pratt gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jack. Heard a lot about you." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I looked at the papers on the counter. Property assessments, zoning maps, and there, circled in red marker, was Grandpa's land, all of it, including my pond and trailer. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. Linda sighed like I was a difficult child. "We're looking at selling the entire property, Jack. Your father's company is downsizing, and with the economy the way it is—" "My pond isn't for sale." I cut in. Mr. Pratt's smile faltered. Dad suddenly became very interested in the fruit bowl on the counter. "Don't be ridiculous," Linda said. "We're talking about a comprehensive development opportunity. The Hendersons' property next door is also on the market. A developer could build a whole subdivision. On my pond." I could feel my pulse in my temples. "My pond that Grandpa left me? That pond." "Jack," Dad finally spoke up, "we have debts. The house has a second mortgage, and my position at work isn't secure. We need to think about our future." "So sell your part," I said. "The deed to my land is separate. Grandpa made sure of that." Linda's face hardened. 1 acre with a stagnant pond and a rusting trailer isn't exactly prime real estate on its own, Jack. It devalues the entire package. "Not my problem," I replied, channeling every ounce of stubbornness Grandpa ever had. "That land is mine and I'm not selling." Mr. Pratt cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should come back another time when—" No, Linda interrupted. Jack needs to understand how the real world works. We're not talking about sentimental value here. We're talking about actual value, dollars and cents. I understand just fine, I said. You want to erase Grandpa's pond to pay for your lifestyle. Those koi have been alive longer than you've been in this family. Linda, her eyes narrowed. Those fish are probably long dead, Jack. And even if they weren't, they're just fish. I thought about Grandpa's weathered hands sprinkling food across the water, about him telling me stories of Japan, while the koi swam lazy circles beneath us, about how he'd trusted me with his inheritance when he could have left it all to Dad. They're not just fish, I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. They're Grandpa's legacy. Mr. Pratt was backing toward the door now, muttering something about calling later. Dad finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of frustration and guilt. Son, sometimes we have to let go of things to move forward. Your grandfather would understand. That was when I lost it. Don't tell me what Grandpa would understand. My voice echoed off Linda's precious granite countertops. He left me that pond because he knew you wouldn't care about it, because he knew you'd do exactly this. Linda stepped between us. That's enough, Jack. If you can't be rational about this, then maybe you should find somewhere else to stay until you calm down. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. Somewhere else? You mean like my trailer? The one you're trying to sell out from under me. The kitchen fell silent. Dad was looking at the floor now, shoulders slumped in that familiar way that meant he'd already surrendered, already chosen the path of least resistance. Linda stood with her arms crossed, face set like concrete. If you won't be reasonable, she said slowly, then yes. Your trailer seems like the perfect place for you to cool off and think about your priorities. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to say something, to stand up for me or at least acknowledge how messed up this situation was. But he just shifted his weight and murmured, "It might be for the best, Jack." His silence hurt more than Linda's words ever could. My own father, unable to look me in the eye as his wife kicked me out. In that moment, I understood why Grandpa had left the pond to me instead of Dad. Some people protect what matters. Others just let it slip away. I went to my room and grabbed my backpack, shoving clothes inside without bothering to fold them. Added my phone charger, the photo of Grandpa and me fishing that I kept on the nightstand, and a coffee can with my savings. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. When I walked back through the kitchen, Linda was already on her phone, probably rescheduling with Mr. Pratt. Dad stood by the refrigerator, looking lost in his own home. "Jack, don't be hasty," he said, his voice lacking any real conviction. "Let's talk about this tomorrow when everyone's calmer." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, heading for the door. "That pond is mine, and I'm not selling. Not tomorrow, not ever." As I stepped outside, the summer heat hit me like a wall. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and started walking, no destination in mind except away from there. With each step, Grandpa's words echoed in my head. "Wait for your moment, Jack, like a fish waits for the current." I didn't know what my moment was supposed to be or when it would come. All I knew was that I had a pond, a trailer, and a promise to keep. The rest would have to figure itself out. Behind me, the door remained closed. No one called after me. No one asked me to come back. Just silence and the sound of my sneakers on the sidewalk as I walked away from the only family I had left. That first night after leaving Dad and Linda's house, I walked until my feet ached. Ended up at a Waffle House, nursing a coffee until 3 a.m. while trying to figure out my next move. The waitress kept giving me those looks, half pity, half concern, probably wondering if I was on a boat without paying my $1.89. I left her a $5 tip just to prove I wasn't that kind of desperate. By sunrise, I'd made my way to Grandpa's property, my property now. The trailer sat there like some forgotten relic from the 1970s, aluminum siding dulled by Oklahoma weather and neglect. It wasn't much to look at, but it was mine. No Linda. No disappointed sighs from Dad. Just me and whatever wildlife had taken up residence in my absence. The key was right where Grandpa always kept it, under a fake rock that fooled absolutely no one. Inside, The air was thick with dust and memories. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. Plaid couch with a permanent dent where he'd sit to watch baseball games, coffee mug still on the side table, his old fishing magazine stacked in crooked piles by the recliner. That first week was rougher than gas station coffee. The trailer smelled like mildew and abandoned dreams, and the water ran rust color for a full minute before clearing up. My new neighbor was a raccoon who somehow figured out how to unlatch the screen door and steal my Doritos every night, no matter where I hid them. I named him Bandit, partly because of the mask-like markings around his eyes, but mostly because that's what he was, a straight-up thief with impressively dexterous paws. I'd come home from work to find chip crumbs all over the linoleum and Bandit's little handprints on everything. We developed a weird roommate relationship. I'd leave him the stale chips at the bottom of the bag, and he'd refrain from rummaging through my other stuff. Not exactly the companion I'd imagined for my new independent life, but at least he didn't critique my career choices. Speaking of careers, I couldn't keep working at Denny's. It was too close to Dad and Linda's, and the last thing I needed was an awkward parking lot encounter. So I got a job at Wilson's Distribution Center, on the edge of town, hauling boxes from trucks to shelves and back again. The pay was slightly better, but the work made Denny's look like a spa retreat. My boss, Mike Wilson, original name for his own company, right? Was a barrel-chested guy with a voice that carried across 3 warehouses without effort. His favorite pastime was standing behind workers and offering motivational gems like, "Read, you're slower than a turtle on sleeping pills." Or, "My grandmother could move those boxes faster, and she's been dead for 15 years. The warehouse was hot, the hours were long, and my muscles screamed every night. But there was something satisfying about the simplicity of it all. Pick up box, move box, put down box, repeat until paycheck. No family drama. No Linda asking when I was going to do something with my life. No Dad silently agreeing with her. After clocking out each evening, I'd drag my exhausted body back to the trailer, shower off the warehouse grime, and then head straight to the pond. Those first few weeks, it looked pretty grim. Overgrown with weeds, water murky with algae and debris. You could barely tell it had once been Grandpa's pride and joy. But I was determined. Every evening, I'd clear a little more vegetation, scoop out a bit more muck, work on the filtration system that had gone kaput years ago. I'd come in reeking of pond water and sweat, fall asleep on Grandpa's couch, then get up and do it all over again. My hands developed calluses on top of calluses. My skin tanned and burned and tanned darker. The pond became my obsession, my therapy. While I worked, I'd think about Grandpa's stories, about his time in Japan, about the way he'd light up when talking about his koi. I started to wonder if the fish were even still alive. It had been several months since Grandpa had properly maintained the pond, and Oklahoma summers were brutal on anything trying to survive outdoors. Still, I kept at it, driven by something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was a stubborn need to prove Linda wrong. Maybe it was wanting to make Grandpa proud, even if he wasn't around to see it. Or maybe it was just having nothing better to do with my evenings than wrestle with pond scum and memories. About 3 weeks in, I had cleared enough of the surface vegetation to get a good look at what I was dealing with. The water was still cloudy, but I could see deeper than before. I was raking out a particularly stubborn clump of algae when something moved beneath the surface, a flash of orange and red that disappeared as quickly as it came. My heart did a weird little jump. No way. Could they still be alive? I dropped the rake and knelt by the water's edge, straining to see through the murk. For several minutes, nothing happened. Just as I was starting to think I'd imagine it, there was again a definite movement, something large gliding through the deeper part of the pond. I ran back to the trailer, grabbed a bag of fish food I'd optimistically purchased at Walmart a few days earlier, and hurried back. My hands were shaking as I sprinkled some pellets onto the water's surface. At first, nothing happened. Then, like a scene from some nature documentary, the water broke and 2 enormous fish rose to the surface. Gold and red scales gleamed despite the dirty water, like fireworks on the 4th of July. They were massive, easily 2 feet long each, and they moved with the slow confidence of creatures who owned their domain. "You're still alive, you O-fighters." I laughed, feeling something warm spread through my chest. These weren't just fish. They were living connections to Grandpa, to his stories, to everything he'd tried to teach me. The koi swam lazy circles, gobbling up the food pellets, seemingly unbothered by the neglected state of their home. They'd survived Oklahoma heat, predators, and neglect, still as vibrant as the day Grandpa had first shown them to me decades ago. That night, lying on the couch with Bandit scratching at the screen door for his Dorito tribute, I remembered something Grandpa had told me years ago. Koi are treasures that wait for their time. Back then, I thought it was just another of his cryptic sayings that made sense only to him. But watching those fish thrive despite everything stacked against them made me wonder if there was more to Grandpa's attachment than simple appreciation. The way he'd cared for them, the way he'd specifically left them to me instead of Dad. There had to be a reason. An idea struck me, ridiculous but tempting. What if I showed the world what I'd found? Not for fame or anything, just to share the small victory with someone other than Bandit. The next evening after work, I cleaned myself up as best I could, which, living in a trailer with temperamental plumbing, wasn't saying much. I put on my least stained t-shirt, grabbed a plastic bucket from the dollar store, and set up my phone on a pile of rocks by the pond. I hit record and just started talking. About Grandpa, about getting kicked out over some fish, about discovering these survivors in the muck. I threw in a joke about Linda thinking ponds were just places to toss her empty latte cups, added some self-deprecating comments about my new raccoon roommate, and finished by showing the koi themselves, majestic despite their less than majestic surroundings. It wasn't exactly Oscar material, but it felt good to talk to someone, even if that someone was just my phone propped on a rock. I uploaded the video to TikTok before I could second-guess myself, expecting maybe a pity like from my buddy Tom, who worked night shift at the gas station. Then I crashed on a couch, bone-tired from another day of warehouse work and pond cleanup. The next morning, I nearly dropped my phone in the toilet when I saw the notifications. Thousands of them. My video had exploded overnight. 200,000 views and climbing fast. Comments were pouring in faster than I could read them. Jack, you're my hero. Those fish are cooler than my annual bonus. Linda sounds like every stepmom ever. Team Jack and koi all the way. I was still trying to process what was happening when my phone dinged with a direct message. Some guy named Hiroshi from Japan. Great. Here came the scammers. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it anyway. Those koi, they are special. Send photo, please. I snorted. Yeah, right. Special like every other fish in every other backyard pond across America. But what did I have to lose? I snapped a clearer picture of them during their morning feeding and sent it off, then headed to work, forgetting about it almost immediately. Mike was in rare form that day, riding me harder than usual about my turtle pace. I kept my head down and focused on boxes, trying not to check my suddenly blowing up social media. By lunch break, my video had hit 1 million views. By the time I clocked out, it had passed 2 million. People were sharing their own stories of family inheritance disputes, of treasured possessions, of things that seemed worthless to others but priceless to them. Something about my story had struck a chord, and for the first time since Grandpa died, I didn't feel quite so alone. When I got back to the trailer that evening, sweaty and sore from lifting boxes all day, I remember the message from Hiroshi. Probably just a troll or bot. But when I checked my phone, I found he'd responded to my fish picture with one of his own. It showed a distinguished-looking Japanese man in a suit that probably cost more than my trailer, kneeling beside an immaculate pond filled with koi. The fish in his pond had the same distinctive pattern as mine, that same fiery red and gold coloration. His message was simple. Your fish are kahaku koi, very rare lineage. I come to Oklahoma next week to see. I laughed out loud. Some Japanese businessman was going to fly to Woodward. Oklahoma to look at my pond? Right. And I was going to win the lottery tomorrow. But then another message came through. A screenshot of flight confirmation from Tokyo to Dallas, dated for the following Tuesday, and a rental car reservation from Dallas to Woodward. My laughter died in my throat. He was serious. This Hiroshi guy, whoever he was, thought my grandfather's fish were important enough to justify an international flight. I sat down heavily on the trailer steps, staring at my phone as more notifications poured in. My viral video was approaching 3 million views now. People I'd gone to high school were suddenly remembering my existence, sending friend requests and messages asking if I was that coy guy from TikTok. But none of that mattered compared to the questions swirling in my head. Who was Hiroshi? What did he know about my grandfather's fish? Why would he travel halfway around the world to see them? The koi swam lazily through the clearer water of the pond, oblivious to the stir they were causing. As the sun set over the Oklahoma plains, turning the sky the same fiery colors as their scales, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa's cryptic words about waiting for the right moment suddenly made a whole lot more sense. Had he known all along? Was this why he left me the pond instead of something more obviously valuable? My heart pounded with possibilities. For the first time since walking out of Dad and Linda's house, I felt something besides anger and determination. I felt hope, looking at the pond, my pond. With new eyes, I wonder if Grandpa had left me far more than just a mud puddle with some fish. Maybe he'd left me a secret that was only now ready to be discovered. The week leading up to Hiroshi's visit felt like waiting for a Christmas morning mixed with the anxiety of a tax audit. I kept checking my phone to see if he'd canceled, convinced this whole thing was some elaborate prank for a Japanese reality show. Who flies halfway around the world to look at some fish in a trailer park pond in Oklahoma? My TikTok fame continued to grow, which didn't help my nerves. 5 million views and counting. Some local news station from Oklahoma City called wanting to interview the coy guy. I declined, worried about Dad and Linda seeing it. The last thing I needed was him showing up with renewed interest in my mud puddle. I spent every free moment making the pond and trailer more presentable. Cleaned the trailer until it smelled more like Lysol than mildew. Bandit watched from a safe distance, clearly judging my sudden housekeeping enthusiasm. Even splurged on a new shirt from Target, blue button-down that didn't scream, "I lift boxes for a living." When Tuesday finally arrived, I called in sick to work. Mike sounded skeptical when I claimed food poisoning from a gas station burrito, but I couldn't exactly tell him I was meeting an international fish expert. I paced around the pond all morning, checking my watch every 5 minutes like it might suddenly give me different news. Around noon, I heard tires on the gravel driveway. A sleek black Lincoln Town car pulled up so out of place next to my rusted pickup that it looked like it had taken a wrong turn from a presidential motorcade. The driver got out first, opening the rear door with practiced precision. And then there he was, Hiroshi Tanaka, stepping out of the car like he was arriving at a business meeting instead of a rundown trailer in rural Oklahoma. He was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 5'5", and older, probably in his 60s. But there was nothing small about his presence. He wore a crisp white suit that practically glowed in the Oklahoma sun, with shoes so polished I could probably see my reflection in them. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly trimmed, and he carried a slim black briefcase that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent would be if I actually paid any. I suddenly felt every bit the warehouse worker in my Target clearance shirt. We stood there for an awkward moment, sizing each other up across 20 feet of dirt. Then he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his serious face, and walked toward me with his hand extended. He introduced himself formally, his English perfect but accented, said he was honored to meet the grandson of Frank Reed. I nearly laughed at the absurdity of anyone being honored to meet me, especially while standing next to a trailer with mismatched siding and a raccoon that was probably inside stealing my lunch at that very moment. When I led him to the pond, his entire demeanor changed. The business-like formality vanished, replaced by an almost childlike excitement. He knelt by the water's edge, seemingly unconcerned about his immaculate white pants, and peered intently at the surface. The koi, as if sensing they had an audience, chose that moment to appear. They swam lazily to the surface, their red and gold scales catching the sunlight. Hiroshi gasped, the same way I might react to seeing a double bacon cheeseburger after a 12-hour warehouse shift. He started speaking rapidly in Japanese, then caught himself and switched back to English. He explained that these weren't just any koi. They were kahaku, one of the most prized varieties in Japan, And not just average kahaku, but a specific bloodline that had been bred by his family for generations before World War II. According to Hiroshi, these koi were thought to be lost forever when the Allied bombing destroyed their breeding facility in 1945. The only surviving pair had been given to an American soldier by Hiroshi's grandfather, a man named Tanaka, the very same officer who had taught my grandfather about respecting silence and patience. I sat down heavily on a nearby rock as the pieces started falling into place. Grandpa had never told me the full story of how he got the koi. I'd always assumed he'd bought them from some exotic pet dealer. But Hiroshi had a different tale to tell. In 1962, while stationed in Japan, my grandfather had saved Tanaka's life, not in some dramatic combat scene, but in a mundane accident. Tanaka's car had gone off a road during a rainstorm, and Grandpa happened to be driving by. He pulled the older man from the wreckage before the car caught fire. Tanaka, bound by a deep sense of honor and unable to repay such a debt with money, had given my grandfather something far more valuable: the last surviving pair of his family's prized koi bloodline, fish that had been hidden away in a remote pond during the war. "Your grandfather never told you this?" Hiroshi asked, looking surprised. I shook my head, thinking about all those evenings by the pond, all Grandpa's stories about Japan and honor, and waiting for the right moment. He'd told me everything except the most important part, that his fish were living treasures. Hiroshi reached into his briefcase and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a much younger version of my grandfather standing next to an elderly Japanese man, both of them smiling beside a small pond. Between them was a wooden box, the same type of traditional container used to transport koi. "My grandfather treasured this photo," Hiroshi said. "He called your grandfather the American samurai, a man of honor in a foreign land." I studied the photo, tried to reconcile this young soldier with the grandfather I'd known, the man with the cherry tobacco pipe and endless patience. In the background of the image, barely visible, was a symbol painted on a stone, the same distinctive marking I'd noticed on one of the koi scales. Hiroshi followed my gaze and nodded. The imperial crest. These koi were bred for the emperor's garden before the war. Their lineage goes back 300 years. My head was spinning. 300 years? Emperor's garden? This couldn't be real. But Hiroshi wasn't finished with his revelations. He knelt back down by the pond and pointed out markings on the koi's fins and scales. Patterns I'd always thought were just random coloration, but were apparently deliberate marks of their pedigree, like royal crests. "This pair," he said, his voice filled with reverence, "is worth approximately $2.5 million. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when your brain can't process what your ears are hearing. $2.5 million? I repeated, certain I had misunderstood. "For fish." Hiroshi nodded seriously. "Champion koi have sold for more. But these are beyond price to my family. We have been searching for this bloodline for decades. My father made me promise on his deathbed to continue the search." I stood there, feeling like I'd been struck by lightning. $2.5 million? For the fish I'd been feeding Walmart pellets? The fish swimming in a pond I'd been cleaning with tools from the dollar store? "Do they also bring you beer and do your taxes?" I joked, my default response to situations I couldn't handle. Hiroshi laughed, a genuine belly laugh that seemed to surprise even him. "Perhaps they do, if you believe strongly enough." We spent the next few hours beside the pond, with Hiroshi examining the fish from every angle. He took water samples, measured the pond's dimensions, and explained more about koi history than I ever thought possible. Apparently, these weren't just pretty fish. They were living art, symbols of perseverance and luck that had been cultivated by a Japanese family for centuries. As the sun began to set, Hiroshi finally closed his notebook and stood up. "Mr. Reed," he said formally, "I would like to make you an offer for these koi." There it was, the moment that would change everything. $2.5 million. I could buy a real house, go to college, never lift another box in Mike's warehouse. I could tell Linda where to shove her kitchen renovation plans. But something held me back. These weren't just valuable fish. They were Grandpa's fish, the last link I had to him, to our evenings by the pond, to everything he'd tried to teach me. I need to think about it, I heard myself saying. Hiroshi nodded, not looking surprised or disappointed. Of course, these decisions should not be rushed. The koi have waited decades. They can wait a little longer. As he was leaving, he handed me his business card. Simple white cardstock with his name and number embossed in gold. Whatever you decide, he said, these fish deserve to be honored. They have survived against impossible odds. Just like Grandpa had always said, fish that hang on no matter what gets thrown at them. After Hiroshi's town car disappeared down the gravel road, I sat by the pond until well after dark. The koi swam lazy circles below the surface, oblivious to their newly discovered worth or the decision weighing on my mind. $2.5 million. Enough to change my life completely. But was that what Grandpa had intended? If the fish were so valuable, why hadn't he sold them himself? Why leave them to me without explaining what they were? I remembered his voice, gravelly from years of smoking. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about waiting for your moment, like a fish waits for the current. Had he been waiting for something? Some moment that never came? Or had he been waiting for me to find my own moment? I went back to the trailer and dug through the boxes I'd never fully unpacked. In the bottom of one, I found Grandpa's old fishing tackle box. Inside, nestled among the lures and hooks, was his pipe, the cherry wood one he'd smoked every evening by the pond. I'd forgotten he'd left it to me specifically in the will, separate from the pond and trailer. The bowl was caked with decades of tobacco residue, the stem worn smooth from years in his grip. I ran my fingers over it, feeling closer to him somehow. Without thinking, I took it outside to the pond and sat in his usual spot. The stars were out in full force, one of those clear Oklahoma nights where the Milky Way spreads across the sky like spilled paint. The air smelled of earth and water and possibility. I'd never smoked in my life and wasn't about to start, but holding Grandpa's pipe felt right somehow, like he was there beside me, guiding me toward a decision. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Dad. The first contact since I'd walked out weeks ago. Heard you become some kind of internet fish celebrity. Linda and I want to talk. Can we meet tomorrow? My stomach tightened. Of course. The video had gone viral enough that someone from town must have shown it to them. Now that there might be value in that mud puddle, they were suddenly interested again. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat there thinking about Grandpa, about Hiroshi's story, about the strange journey that had led me to this moment. Two homeless koi that survived a world war, traveled across an ocean, and ended up in rural Oklahoma, waiting decades for their true value to be recognized. Just like I'd been waiting, without even knowing it, for my moment to arrive. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay on Grandpa's old couch, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning the situation over in my mind like a puzzle box I couldn't quite solve. Sell the fish, and I could have the future I'd never dared to imagine. College, financial security, a real home. Keep them, and what? Continue living in a rundown trailer, working at a dead-end job, just to preserve some fish my grandfather had mysteriously left me? But something told me there was more to this decision than simple economics. Grandpa hadn't just left me fish. He'd left me a legacy, a connection to history, to honor, to something larger than myself. As dawn broke, I made coffee in Grandpa's ancient percolator and took it outside. The koi were already active, swimming near the surface as if expecting their morning feeding. Looking at them now, knowing their true value, their incredible journey, they seemed different somehow. Not just fish, but survivors, living monuments to patience and perseverance. I remembered Grandpa's words. Wait for your moment, Jack, like a fish waits for the current. Maybe this was my moment, not to cash in, but to understand what he'd been trying to teach me all along. The fish had survived a war, an ocean crossing, and decades in an Oklahoma pond. They'd outlived their original owners and caretakers. They'd been waiting all this time, not to be sold, but to be recognized for what they truly were. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Dad. Mr. Peterson says you need to sign off on the property sale. Developers offering good money for the whole parcel. Let's be sensible about this, Jack. And there it was, the real reason for their renewed interest. Not concern for me, not regret over kicking me out, but a property deal that needed my signature. Linda and Dad might own the house and most of the land, but they couldn't sell Grandpa's pond without my permission. And now that my little video had gone viral, they'd figured out there might be value here after all. I looked at the koi swimming in the morning light, their scales flashing gold and red like living flames. $2.5 million. Enough to solve all my problems, to set me up for life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandpa had left them to me for a reason bigger than money. He could have sold them himself if that's all they meant to him. Instead, he'd made them my inheritance, my responsibility. The cherry pipe sat heavy in my hand, a tangible connection to the past. I remembered how Grandpa would sit in this exact spot, smoking thoughtfully as he watched the fish. What had he been thinking all those times? What had he been waiting for? The answer came to me slowly, like the koi emerging from the depth of the pond. Grandpa had been teaching me about patience, about honor, about recognizing true value beneath the surface. He'd known I wouldn't understand right away. He'd known I'd need to struggle, to find my own path, to learn the lesson for myself. $2.5 million was a fortune, but what were these fish really worth? To Hiroshi's family, they were a lost treasure, a connection to their heritage. To me, they were Grandpa's legacy, his final lesson about what really matters in life. I realized I was facing the same choice Grandpa must have confronted years ago: cash in on something valuable or preserve something priceless. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the pond, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The decision that had seemed so impossible last night now felt obvious, inevitable even. Linda and Dad could plot all they wanted. Hiroshi could offer millions. But these fish, this pond, they were more than assets to be liquidated. They were a trust, passed from one generation to the next, surviving against impossible odds. I get it now, Grandpa, I whispered to the morning air. I finally get it. The koi swam beneath the surface, their movements unhurried, patient. They'd waited this long. They could wait a little longer while I figured out exactly how to protect them. The meeting with Dad and Linda went exactly as expected. All fake smiles and sudden familial concern, with the property contract conveniently sitting on the coffee table between us. Linda had even baked cookies, like we were in some Hallmark movie about reconciliation instead of an obvious cash grab. "Jack, honey, we've missed you," she said, sliding the plate of chocolate chips toward me. I hadn't been honey since I was 12, and even then only when she wanted something. Dad at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. He kept fidgeting with his wedding ring, a nervous habit from when I was a kid. Some things never change. Their pitch was almost elegant in its simplicity. Sign over my pond to complete the sale package, and they generously split the proceeds with me. 20% for my inheritance. How magnanimous. I let them finish their rehearsed speech before telling them about Hiroshi's visit and the true value of those worthless fish. The color drained from Linda's face faster than water through a broken dam. Dad's mouth actually hung open, like a cartoon character discovering his winning lottery ticket. $2.5 million? Linda's voice jumped at least 2 octaves. For fish, I just nodded, enjoying the moment probably more than I should have. Sometimes karma delivers in spectacular fashion. What happened next surprised even me. They didn't demand a share or threaten legal action. Instead, they pivoted so fast, it's a wonder they didn't get whiplash. "Jack, we're family," Linda said, her voice honey-sweet. "We should stick together through this exciting opportunity." Dad nodded along, suddenly finding his voice. "Son, I know things have been rough, but this changes everything. You can move back home while we figure out next steps." Home, as if that house had ever truly been my home. I didn't immediately tell them what I'd decided about the koi. I wanted to see how far they'd go with this newfound appreciation for family bonds. Pretty far, it turned out. Linda offered to clean out the good guest room for me. Dad suggested we go fishing sometime, something we hadn't done since I was 14. Amazing what $2.5 million can do for family dynamics. I thanked them for their concern, but declined their invitation to return to the house. I had a trailer to fix up, after all, and a decision to make. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo. Hiroshi had gone back to Japan, but left me his private number, expecting my call. Dad texted daily with thinly veiled questions about my plans for the future. Even Mike at the warehouse was suddenly interested in my well-being after someone showed him my viral video. Fame, even the small-town TikTok variety, changes how people see you. Suddenly, I wasn't Jack the warehouse worker or Jack the fish guy. I was Jack with potential money. The difference was both fascinating and depressing. The decision about the koi weighed on me constantly. $2.5 million would change my life completely. I could travel, go to college, never worry about bills again. I could buy a real house somewhere far from Woodward, somewhere with actual opportunities. But every time I sat beside the pond, watching those fish glide to the water, I felt Grandpa's presence. I remembered his patience, his stories, his lessons about waiting for the right moment. If he wanted to sell the koi, why not tell me their value? Why make it part of this elaborate life lesson? The answer came to me one evening as I was replacing the filtration system. I'd ordered a professional-grade setup. Might as well treat million-dollar fish to clean water, and was struggling with the installation when I noticed something carved into one of the large rocks bordering the pond. I'd never paid attention to this particular stone before. It was partially buried, but as I cleared away years of dirt and vegetation, an inscription emerged. Value isn't in the having, but in the knowing. Grandpa's handwriting. His words, hidden here all along, waiting for me to discover them just like I discovered the true value of the koi. That night, I called Hiroshi. He answered immediately, despite the time difference. I explained my decision carefully, expecting disappointment or perhaps an increased offer. Instead, he surprised me. He understood completely. More than understood, he seemed to have expected this outcome all along. These fish represented a heritage, a connection between families that money couldn't quantify. We talked for hours, formulating a plan that honored both the koi and my grandfather's intentions. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The path forward was clear. The next morning, I walked into Oklahoma First National Bank, like I owned the place. The manager nearly swallowed his tie when I explained my situation and what I wanted to do. 2 hours and several phone calls later, I walked out with everything arranged. My next stop was Mr. Peterson's law office, where I instructed him to draw up the necessary paperwork. The elderly lawyer listened to my plans, nodding slowly. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said when I finished. "He always said you'd figure out eventually." A week later, I stood on the front porch of Dad and Linda's house, their nice place across town, not Grandpa's old property, with legal documents in hand. Linda answered the door in her yoga outfit, surprise flickering across her face. "Jack, we were just talking about you. Come in, come in." Dad was in his recliner, watching golf. He straightened up when he saw me, muting the TV. "Son, good to see you." I declined their offer of iced tea and got straight to the point. I'd made my decision about the koi and about Grandpa's entire property. I slid the documents across their coffee table. Dad picked them up, confusion creasing his forehead as he scanned the first page. "You're buying back the rest of Dad's property? The house and remaining land that I inherited?" I nodded. "Fair market value, plus 20%. The funds will be transferred to your account as soon as you sign." Linda grabbed the papers from Dad, her eyes widening as she saw the amount. "But this is more than enough to buy something nice in Tulsa." I finished for her, "like you've always wanted." The look on their faces was priceless. Confusion mixed with calculations, suspicion battling with greed. They couldn't figure out how I had this kind of money if I hadn't sold the koi. I explained the arrangement Hiroshi and I had worked out. No, I hadn't sold the fish, but I had entered into a partnership with the Tanaka family. The koi would stay in my pond, but they would be officially recognized as part of the Tanaka breeding registry. In exchange, I received partial ownership in their koi farming business, a very profitable enterprise, as it turned out. Dad and Linda listened in stunned silence as I outlined the terms of my offer. They would sell me the house and remaining land, and in return, I'd help them relocate to Tulsa with more than enough money to start fresh. You don't have to decide right now, I told them, standing to leave. The offer's good for 30 days. It took them 3. When it comes to cash on the barrel, even the most complicated family dynamics simplify themselves pretty quickly. They moved out by the end of the month, Dad sheepishly shaking my hand as they handed over the keys. Linda already talking about the luxurious condo they found in Tulsa's trendy downtown district. As their SUV pulled away, packed with belongings, I felt no bitterness, just a strange sense of things coming full circle. They got what they wanted. I got what I needed. Sometimes life works out that way. Over the next 6 months, I transformed Grandpa's entire property into one cohesive estate. His old house, which had been sitting empty since his passing, was renovated into a visitor center. The land my father had inherited became a Japanese-inspired garden, and my trailer was transformed into a cozy office. The pond, expanded and enhanced with proper filtration and landscaping, became the centerpiece of what I named Frank's Garden. Hiroshi flew back for the grand opening, bringing members of his family to see the legendary koi in their new old home. We installed a ceremonial stone lantern beside the pond, carved with both Japanese and English inscriptions telling the story of 2 soldiers, 2 families, and 2 koi that connected them across oceans and generations. The opening day of Frank's Garden exceeded all my expectations. People came from across Oklahoma, drawn by the viral story and promise of seeing the $1 million fish. Kids tossed pennies into the smaller decorative ponds, making wishes. Veterans stood solemnly before the plaque honoring Grandpa's service. Local news covered the event, the same station that had tried to interview me months earlier. I hired Tom from the gas station as my first employee, gave Bandit the raccoon official mascot status, complete with special feeding area far from the visitor center snacks, and even reserved a bench for Mike from the warehouse, who couldn't believe his slowest worker had created all this. As visitors wandered the paths, admiring the cherry trees and stone lanterns, I found myself telling Grandpa's story over and over, about patience and honor, about waiting for the right moment, about how things of true value often remain hidden until you're ready to recognize them. Wait for your moment, like a fish waits for the current, became the garden's unofficial motto, printed on T-shirts and coffee mugs in the gift shop. Tacky maybe, but paid the bills and kept Grandpa's wisdom alive. Linda and Dad came to visit once, awkwardly touring the garden like strangers. Linda complimented the landscaping in a tone that suggested surprise I could accomplish something so tasteful. Dad stood long before the memorial plaque, saying nothing but seeing everything. We didn't speak much, but when they left, Dad squeezed my shoulder, the closest we'd come to understanding in years. The koi continued to thrive, eventually producing offspring that Hiroshi's family carefully transported back to Japan to rejuvenate their ancestral bloodline. Our partnership flourished, expanding into educational programs about Japanese culture and conservation efforts. Sometimes on quiet evenings after the garden closes, I sit in Grandpa's spot by the pond, his cherry pipe in my hand. I watch the koi swim lazy circles, their scales flashing gold and red in the fading light. And I think about the strange path that led me here. A trailer I didn't want, a pond I didn't understand, fish I nearly lost, all combining to create a legacy I never expected. Would Grandpa be proud of what I've built? I like to think so. Not because of success or the money, but because I finally understood what he was trying to teach me all those years. That true value isn't in what you possess, but in what you preserve. Not in what you accumulate, but in what you pass on. Visitors often ask if I regret not taking the millions offered for the koi. They seem disappointed when I say no, like I failed some essential American test of capitalism. But then I walk them around the garden, show them the families enjoying the space, the veterans finding peace beside the water, the children learning about a culture from across the world. And they begin to understand. Some treasures aren't meant to be cashed in. Some inheritances aren't about money at all. Some fish are worth more in the water than in the bank. Every morning as I unlock the garden gates, I whisper a thank you to Grandpa for his patience with a grandson too impatient to see what was right in front of him, for his trust that I'd eventually figure it out, for teaching me that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that look worthless to everyone else. The koi still swim in circles, patient and golden, waiting for whatever current comes next. And thanks to them, so do I.